We are being also joined by Jacob Olidor. He's live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Olidor is a director of research at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, Gemeinde Center for Defense and Strategy. So welcome to World DNA.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mr. Olidor, let's start right off with there. Biden has asked for $100 billion. That includes, military support for Israel and Ukraine, saying it would boost U.S. security for generations. Now, talk to us about the implications here and what is U.S. aiming to achieve for generations?
It's a good question. You know, the speech was a little bit of a departure from President Biden's very strong and consistent rhetoric since October 7th, since the horrendous attack by Hamas against Israel. This speech, of course, is trying to make a case that both wars are connected, and they have connectivity to them. But fundamentally, they're two different issues. And while it's important to make a case for aid to Ukraine, the threat is very different than that posed by Iran. Ultimately, it's Iran directing Hamas in the attack against Israel. So I think that was probably the biggest thing missing from a speech that actually, in my view, kind of touched on maybe too many topics. But the one that was missing, it received a passing mention, was Iran. And that was really the policy change and the focus that should have been the emphasis on his remarks when he was in Israel. It should have been emphasized a bit more today, and certainly against the backdrop of Iran-backed militias targeting U.S. bases and Hezbollah obviously mobilizing protesters.
So also let's talk about what's happening in the region on ground. In fact, Israeli Defense Minister said they'll be seeing Gaza from inside. What do you make of these comments, given that it's already been several days since Israel, of course, initially said it suggested a ground offensive?
Well, of course, I mean, as you mentioned, everybody is sort of waiting, and, the ground offensive was initially expected last week. It's been delayed. We've also heard statements from IDF spokespersons that it won't resemble what people expect it to look like. So I think, we're also all in the same position, sort of waiting to see what happens. I think it's fair to say that Gaza is just a highly complex environment. It'll be a very, very fraught operation, not to mention the hostage dimension. And so certainly we'll be waiting to watch this very, very tenuous situation unfold.
Jacob, I just want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, that, this was like President Biden's speech. It kind of linked the two wars, Israel and Ukraine, what is happening in Israel with Hamas and, of course, between Ukraine and Russia. Talk to us a little bit more about that, if you could elaborate further on what U.S. gains from this speech, or at least what the Biden administration seems to gain from these kind of connections that they're trying to form with the speech.
I think what it gains fundamentally, I think it's an important case to make. I think that the support for Ukraine is a righteous cause. It's an important case. It's defending the sovereignty of a state. And obviously, President Biden who has yet to make a real clear policy statement about Ukraine, this might have been the closest he's come to it. And obviously, it's on the eve of a very substantial aid package to Ukraine. That's leaving aside kind of the way in which he's implemented the policy. But it's a very distinct issue from the war that Israel faces right now, which is a defensive war, which is actually being waged by one of several Iranian proxies in the region. That, I would say, is the thing missing from the president's comments throughout since early October, is that it's not just Israel and Hamas. You cannot truly capture accurately what's happening on the ground if you don't take into account the Iranian hand in coordinating, supporting, training Hamas, without which it would not have been successful in its attack. And certainly you're seeing that with escalatory rhetoric and actions on the northern border and elsewhere in the region. And so I think so long as that focus, that explicit recognition of Iran's role, which has been corroborated in several media reports throughout the last few weeks, so long as that's not the case, even the important military deterrent and support that we've provided, that will be limited in its effect.
Right, sir, absolutely. Also, 2 missiles were believed to be fired towards Israel from Yemen recently, while Israel's fight with Hezbollah continues in the north. Now, this has been a major question as well, and diplomatic overtures, they've come with the aim of also trying to contain this war and stop it from spilling into a wider regional conflict. Is this no longer just the Israel versus Hamas Hamas war? What's next in your opinion?
I think it's bound to, and I've written this as well, and JINSA has written daily numerous research projects, which you can find on our website, jinsa.org. But I've written actually on the day of the Hamas attack that this risks escalating into a regional conflict depending on the actions of the United States. And so I understand that the administration is trying very hard to contain it to Israel and Hamas in Gaza. But incidentally, the way to do that is actually to address the root cause of everything, which is Iran. And so long as Iran is not implicated directly, it will feel free to advance its destructive agenda across the region, as we're seeing happen today.
All right. Thank you so much, Jacob Olidor, for joining in and sharing all your insights on this. Pleasure talking to you. That was Mr. Olidor, Director of Research at the JINSA's Jaiminder Center for Defense and Strategy, joining in on World again.
Thank you very much.